Hi everyone, this is 6.06, the challenges of Globalization 1, and we are starting with slide 12. Labor migration. Another trend in employment that results from globalization is increased mobility of people within and among countries. Both types of employment-related migration are on the rise, providing benefits and creating challenges. Internal migration, the movement of workers within a country, is an increasing trend in the new globalizer countries, as people move from rural areas into urban centers to provide labor for the growing industrial sector. Internal migration often causes social problems. It puts increased pressure on already crowded areas and puts many migrants in a vulnerable position. They leave home with a few resources, seeking work in cities where the supply of workers is plentiful and growing all the time. They compete for jobs with very low wages, difficult working conditions, and little or no job security. They are often excluded from having the same rights as permanent residents, such as education and health care. And in many countries, there are ethnic or religious conflicts that arise when populations from different parts of the country begin to mix, especially as they compete for jobs and other scarce economic resources. Shenzhen, an economic snapshot. China has achieved phenomenal economic growth over the past 30 years, but China also suffers from a number of serious problems from globalization, and it will eventually need to change its growth pattern. One of the best examples of this need to change can be seen in Shenzhen, a city that has been dramatically affected by China's economic progress. Shenzhen, one of the fastest growing cities in China, showcases the effects of globalization, good and bad. International migration. International migration, also known as immigration, is on the rise globally as well. The United Nations estimates that there are currently about 200 million immigrants who work in foreign countries for a year or more. The movement of laborers is not evenly balanced. Over 60% of the world's migrant laborers are moving from developing to developed countries in search of better pay and better working conditions. Global immigration can be both beneficial and harmful. Countries that receive immigrants are able to reduce labor shortages in certain industries. The countries being left by migrants benefit from reduced unemployment and increased financial flows, which come from the money that migrant workers send home to their families. International migration also causes problems. The emigration of the most qualified professionals creates a problem of brain drain. Brain drain is the loss of intellectual and technical personnel from the domestic workforce. This limits economic development by creating shortages of workers who are in the best position to spur innovation and efficiency. At the same time, increased immigration from developing countries often causes resentment in the developed countries, where insecurity over job losses and conflicts over assimilation create cultural, social, and political stresses. Environmental problems. Globalization is mainly an economic phenomenon, but it has effects outside the economy as well. Globalization puts increased pressure on natural resources around the world, and it can lead to significant environmental damages. Economic growth has resulted in the depletion of tropical rainforests, ocean fisheries, and mineral and fuel reserves. Air and water pollution, soil contamination, and sanitation problems have arisen from the rapid industrialization and urbanization in developing areas. The spread of economic development has led to a sharp increase in the amount of coal, oil, and natural gas being burned in developing countries. This, in turn, has led to increased emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases that threaten to raise global temperatures and significantly alter the areas of the world that human beings can live. The main force behind this severe environmental impact is the profit motive. Governments in advanced economies require businesses to pay extra costs to comply with strict environmental regulations. This helps protect the environment. But the most attractive areas for foreign investment are countries without strong environmental regulations because those extra costs can be avoided. In this way, globalization benefits large corporations at the expense of the environment. At the same time, the increase in economic growth fueled by globalization is rapidly transforming the agricultural and rural areas of the world into industrialized urban areas. Human rights and globalization. Another problem facing the world today is the violation of human rights. In theory, globalization promotes economic development, which should help empower people economically and politically. It also increases media coverage that sheds lights on torture, slavery, and other violations of basic civil rights in offending countries. In theory, globalization should lead to the reduction of human rights abuses around the world. To a certain extent, this is happening. Activist groups that promote protection of human rights have also been able to organize more effectively for the same reasons that businesses have been able to become more productive. At the same time, globalization has increased the flow of trade and investment to countries that often abuse human rights. Companies that challenge host governments over human rights abuses might win support from consumers and workers, but they risk losing their investment. That threat keeps them from pressuring the governments of countries in which they invest. International investors are usually more interested in profits, and worker exploitation allows employers to pay very low wages and to force workers to work long hours in poor and often unsafe conditions. Terrorism. Globalization is ushering in a world in which national, regional, and cultural differences are pushed aside as people are connected across national and ethnic boundaries. In some situations, this helps reduce long-standing conflicts by improving cooperation and understanding. However, globalization has often had the opposite effect. Instead of promoting toleration, globalization can fuel hatred by forcing people who have fundamentally different worldviews and goals into close and undesired contact. Globalization also creates anger among those in the world's poorest countries, where the harms of globalization are much clearer than the benefits. Those who experience extreme poverty can easily see that rich countries are getting richer while they are getting poorer. This can give them the sense that globalization is unfair. Some of those people think that globalization should be stopped by violent means if necessary. Economic and cultural dislocations aren't the only causes of terrorism, but terrorism can more easily thrive when resentment and insecurity exist. And the same networks that allow people to come closer together around the globe also allow terrorist networks to work more closely and effectively to achieve their goals. Americanization and its discontents. Many see globalization as a process that adds to the Americanization of the world, forcing U.S. values and culture upon the rest of the world. Some people resent the U.S. for these impositions, and a small minority is trying to stop it through violent means. The rise of terrorism may help globalization in certain ways, as it brings countries that have increased concerns about security closer together to combat terrorists. They cooperate to monitor the flows of information, people, and monies across the borders. However, these efforts can inhibit economic growth. New laws intended to prevent terrorists from moving their monetary resources are leading to greater scrutiny of banks and their policies, which slows down the flow of capital. The fear that poorly guarded borders allow terrorists to enter target countries has led to new rules about border patrol, immigration, restrictions, and monitoring of foreign travelers. New security measures at airports have raised the costs of travel, affecting profitability for the airlines as well as business travelers. The problems of globalization. Globalization is transforming the world by offering opportunities for economic development, but the opportunities do not come without problems. Some of the negative effects of globalization include a widening gap between rich and poor countries, working poverty, obstacles that keep the poorest countries from participating in globalization, labor migration disrupting cultures and economies, environmental damage, human rights abuses, and terrorism. Many countries would like to take steps to handle these problems, but there are problems coming up with and implementing effective countermeasures. Without stronger international institutions to make and enforce standard rules, many people will continue to feel the negative side effects of globalization. Test your knowledge of the problems facing the world today that are caused or compounded by globalization. Problems for the United States. For well over 100 years, the United States has been the biggest player on the global economic game board, with the world's single largest national economy. But times are changing, and thanks to globalization, the economic dominance of the U.S. is being challenged. Increasing flows of capital, technology, and trade help competitors make great strides in economic growth and increased efficiency. More and more jobs are being sent overseas through offshoring and international outsourcing, and there are a growing number of U.S. companies with foreign ownership. Further, the U.S. trade deficit is growing at a rapid rate. While the U.S. still has a very powerful economy, it is gradually losing its advantage. The European Union is a major threat to U.S. dominance, but so are the rapidly developing economies of China, India, Brazil, South Korea, Russia, and Malaysia. In this evolving situation, it is conceivable that the effects of globalization could drive the U.S. economy down to second place by 2020, when many experts believe China will lay claim to the title of the world's biggest economy. Job loss. Globalization is both a boon and a threat to U.S. economy. While globalization opens up international markets for U.S. exports, it also subjects U.S. companies to increased competition from cheaper, foreign-made goods. As the U.S. lowers its trade barriers, cheap imports drive some companies to lay off workers and shut down factories. In certain cases, whole industries are threatened when foreign competitors take over these markets. The result for the U.S. economy is significant job loss, especially among lower income and middle income workers. During the first half of the 2000s, as many as 2 million manufacturing jobs were lost in the U.S. While some of these jobs have returned since the economic crisis of 2008 and 2009, the United States still faced over 7% unemployment in mid-2013. These developments have driven the U.S. into a defensive mode to protect industries that are most heavily challenged. Offshoring and outsourcing. Intensified global economic competition has pushed U.S. companies to improve efficiency and reduce costs. This includes shifting operations to areas where production costs are lower, a practice known as offshoring. The main attraction of offshoring is the availability of workers who can be paid much less than the U.S. minimum wage. Another method of reducing labor costs is outsourcing. Outsourcing occurs when a company contracts some of its services to another company, often overseas. This is a common business strategy intended to streamline operations by having an independent supplier provide some components that had previously been produced within the company itself. Offshoring typically involves manufacturing processes, such as an apparel manufacturer building facilities abroad, to make and assemble garments using cheap foreign labor. Outsourcing typically involves hiring foreign employees to do work in the service industry, often made possible through advances in communication and information technology. This comes to an end of this recording. We're going to stop at slide 23 and we'll pick up on slide 24 for the next recording. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Have a great day.